S. Chan presents Educational Video Lectures. Difficult concepts made easy. Study anywhere, anytime.
Welcome to S. Chan Academy, and I am Dr. Anmol Bhatia. We are covering the course Applied Thermodynamics, and topic for this video is refrigerants. We'll be looking at the aspect of refrigerant and what would be the ideal refrigerant for the refrigerating properties that we'll be learning in this particular part of the video.
If you want to study this topic in detail, refer to the book by S. Chan Publishing. Link is provided in the description box.
So the topic is refrigerant, and we'll be straight away starting this topic with that history of refrigeration. So majority of the evidence that indicates is the Chinese were the first one to store natural ice and snow to cool wine and the delicacies. And ancient people of India and Egypt cooled liquids in the porous earthen jars. So there was that history of refrigeration. Then in 1834, Jacob Perkins, an American, who developed a closed refrigeration system using the liquid expansion and then compression to produce this cooling. So what refrigerant he used? He used ether as a refrigerant, and in the hand operated compressor, and the water cooled condenser is also used. In 1850s or 70s, ammonia, or you can say water, carbon dioxide, was used as a refrigerant. And then in early 1900s, sulfur dioxide, methyl chloride is used as a domestic refrigerants. And in 1930s, halocarbons refrigerator, namely R12, R22, R114 or R22, they are basically used as refrigerants. And their advantages are they are the stable compounds, and they are favorable to the thermodynamic properties, and they are safer than the existing refrigerants. So this is particularly the history of refrigeration. And if I talk about the principle, so modern refrigeration and air conditioning equipment is dominated by the compression, or you can say that the compressor is incorporated in the modern day technology that is built in, and that is related to the thermodynamic principle of the reverse Carnot cycle. That is basically explained in my previous videos. If you haven't watched those videos which are related to the basic refrigeration cycle, then you can visit the playlist of S. Chan Academy channel. Then these refrigerant do what? Refrigerant basically changes the phase during the cooling, and it is used again and again in the operation. So this is the basic principle behind refrigeration. So why this refrigerant is important? So this refrigerant basically leads to the thermodynamic efficiency is basically dependent on the operating temperatures. So what happens here in practical issues such as the system size, or you can say the operating cost or safety reliability, which is there. So due to the several issues, and one of the major issue is the ozone depletion, which would come across in this video, and there is one of the aspect of global warming. So this refrigerant play a major role, and the selection of the refrigerant is one of the important issues in the recent times. So this refrigerant plays a major role because if it leaks into the environment, and when it causes ozone depletion and this global warming, it ultimately comes back to us. So we would be concerned about the nature and the society. So that is one of the important aspect of studying this refrigerants. Now, what is a refrigerant? Refrigerant is basically a working substance, basically of two types, primary and secondary. Primary is that particular refrigerant which is used directly in the working fluid. Let's say for the refrigerator we use VCC or VAR systems that we will discuss in the later part. And these fluids generally provide refrigeration by undergoing the change in process by the evaporator. And secondary refrigerants or secondary the refrigerants are those liquids which are used to transport thermal energy from one location to another. So these refrigerants are not particularly used in the direct form, but they are used to transport energy from one location to another. So secondary refrigerant are basically the antifreezes, or you can say the brines are basically called as the secondary refrigerants. So if I look at the primary refrigerant, the refrigerant as I have told you, which is directly used to cool to cause the cooling effect in the evaporator, that is particularly related to undergoing the phase changes, that they are particularly referred to as the primary refrigerant. The certain examples like halocarbon or azeotrops, or you can say inorganic refrigerant or hydrocarbon refrigerants, these are the finest cases. And the secondary refrigerant, as I have already told you, that brines or antifreezes are used and they do not undergo any phase changes. They are used in large refrigeration units. Like you might have heard about the case in which certain vendors using brines or antifreezes in their deep freezers. So these are basically used in large refrigeration units, and basically they are commonly used secondary refrigerator, and they are the solution of they are having the solution of water, ethylene glycol or propylene glycol, that can also be used in this particular case. So secondary refrigerator can be used if the working temperature is above 3 degrees Celsius. So water can also be used as a secondary refrigerator refrigerant, and brine is basically an aqueous solution of sodium chloride, or you can say that calcium chloride in water, and that is used as a temperature below the freezing temperature or the freezing point of the water, which is 0 degrees Celsius. That can be used in cooling of fish, meat or ice plants. If I talk about ethylene glycol or propylene glycol, we mix it with water and it gives a colorless and odorless solution. So these have the capacity to lower the freezing temperatures, and hence it is used as an antifreeze mixtures in icy engines cooling systems. So these propylene glycol can also be used in this icy engine technology. But these solutions becomes corrosive after some time, and we need to undergo certain corrosion treatments also prior to using this particular secondary refrigerant. So advantages of the secondary refrigerant is different rooms of the building can be cooled up to different temperatures by adjusting the flow rate of the secondary refrigerant, and they are easily handled. These can be easily controlled, and it eliminates those long refrigeration lines, and it particularly reduces those pressure drawback of the primary refrigerant. Now there are certain properties, desirable properties of the secondary refrigerant. Number one, it should have the low freezing point. It should not freeze by itself. It should have high temperature, or you can say that high heat transfer coefficient. It should have the high specific heat. The vapor pressure should be low, and the stability part should be lesser in this. That means it should have a good stability, and it should not be flammable, and it should not be toxic. So these are particular characteristics of the secondary refrigerator. So we stop here for a short break. So far we have learned about the secondary refrigerator. After coming back from the break, we will learn about the primary refrigerant situation.
Now quality learning is easily available at your doorstep. S. Chand Academy brings detailed lectures based on AICTE curriculum as per the New Education Policy 2020. So do not forget to subscribe to the S. Chand Academy and access the wide world of knowledge conveniently sitting at your home. Stay connected and keep watching S. Chand Academy. Happy learning!
Welcome back after the break to S. Chand Academy. So far we have understood about the secondary refrigerant. Now in this part we will be understanding about the primary refrigerant and desirable properties of refrigerants. Primary refrigerant can be having certain examples like CFCs or HCFCs, which is R22, or HFCs. If I talk about the structure, so you have a carbon and then chlorides are there and two fluorides are there. So chlorofluorocarbons are there. And when we strike off this chlorine and replace it with hydrogen, so hydrochlorofluorocarbon it becomes. And when another two carbons are used and we basically strike off chlorine from here, so it becomes hydrofluorocarbon, which is R134A. So CFCs are basically these chlorofluorocarbons which are particularly known as freons, and HCFCs are hydrochlorofluorocarbons, HFCs are hydrofluorocarbons that I have told you with the help of the structure. So chlorofluorocarbons are basically, they were developed by the General Motors researchers in 1920s and they are commercialized as freons. They are most stable and it remains in the atmosphere for many years, allowing them to diffuse to the higher altitudes. And it basically contains chlorine, fluorine and carbon. So CFC breaks down and chlorine combines with and consumes some ozone. So because it consumes some ozone, so ozone depletion is one of the major reason of the CFCs. Then this HCFCs came into existence and they are hydrogenated, as I have explained it through the structure, and these are basically not stable and most of it breaks down before reaching high altitudes, and it contains hydrogen, chlorine and fluorine, so it is less damaging to ozone. And HFCs are basically not having chlorine into it, they are only having hydrogen, fluorine and carbon, so they do not have any chlorine content in it and they basically do not deplete ozone. So these are the categorization of the primary refrigerant. Now we'll look at the halocarbon refrigerant. They are synthetically produced or derived from ethane, and were developed by the freon family of the refrigerant. They are developed basically as freon family, and these halocarbon refrigerants are commonly used in domestic or commercial applications due to their wide range of boiling points in the atmospheric temperatures. So as fluorine is there, so it makes it non-toxic and it is ozone unfriendly refrigerant. So it has a particular harm to ozone as well. Then halocarbons can be an examples like CFCs or R11, R12, R40, R132, 122. So these are certain gases which are categorized under this particular head, and the names are particularly listed on the presentation. You can see that R134 is that particular that refrigerant which is used in majority of the industrial practices, and it do not harm the ozone layer, as I have illustrated it with the help of that structure which is already there. Now we'll look at this azeotrope refrigerant, or you can say that mixed category of refrigerant. So it is a stable mixture of two or several refrigerant where you can see the vapor phase or the liquid phase is retained and identical compositions were retained at a larger temperature values. So thermodynamic property, it remains fixed, and you can see the code is different from the previous category. Like in the previous category we had the code which is starting from 1 and it has some 2 values and it reaches to 4, but the code for this particular type of refrigerant, it starts with the digit 5. So if I say R500 or 502, that indicates that it is a case of azeotrope and it is basically the mixture of two refrigerants. R500 indicates that it is the mixture of 73.8% of R12 and 26.2 percentage of R152. Similarly, for R502, the mixture of R22 and R115. Now you have another category which is zeotropic refrigerants. So this is one of the category in which the composition is there in the liquid phase and it differs to that of the vapor phase. So this category, which is zeotropic refrigerant, they do not boil at the constant temperature, unlike this azeotropic conditions. So these are basically represented by a letter A, and that can be a combination of these three cases, which is R125, 143A and 134A, that having the composition of 44, 52% and 4% values. Then you have hydrocarbon refrigerants, which is HC refrigerants. So they are satisfactory, that means thermodynamic properties are there. Extraordinary, they are reliable, and though it do not have any losses, and it is used since the beginning of the century. Most of the hydrocarbons are flammable and it requires additional safety precautions, and it do not use in the industry and the commercial applications, and it is basically used or prominent in the domestic markets. Examples are these like butane or isobutane or ethane. These are the particular examples. And for very small commercial systems like car air conditioning, these particular types of refrigerants are growing. If I talk about the current or the future refrigerant scenario, these kind of categories are basically emerged out. The first one is R134A. This is emerged as most prominent used and primary substitution of the CFCs. As I have told you that it do not harm any ozone layer and it do not cause any global warming. So this is primarily used. Another is HCFC, which is 22, and HCFC 123. This is also a viable alternative, but it will eventually be phased out by the future development of the new refrigerants. So in Europe, what happens is natural refrigerants such as ammonia or carbon dioxide or propane are being used more, and our legal system makes it flammable refrigerants, and these basically are questionable in US, and these flammable refrigerant that our government uses, which is the Indian culture, that is basically questionable or objectionable as far as this US government is concerned. So there are certain environmental effects of refrigerants, so we will be discussing that. One thing is global warming. So it directly contributes to the global warming because it leads to development of carbon dioxide, and that ultimately increases the temperature of the overall globe. And ozone depletion no doubt is one of the cause of concern. This leads to ozone depletion and ultimately it leads to several problems, and there is lot of mess on this particular topic of ozone depletion from early 70s. So these are basically the scientists which were Sherwood Roland and Mario Molina, and they are at the University of California. They first discovered that these laws of ozone in the stratosphere was there because of the high flying aircrafts and spacecrafts which are there. And they finally came to the conclusion that this particularly leads to exceptionally stable chlorine, which is particularly there in this chlorofluorocarbons. So to a particular extent of time, it breaks up certain layers of this O3. So it leads to the depletion, and because of that catalytic depletion of ozone, it leads to certain problems. So this chlorine which is there in inside that particular atom, so it creates a chemical reaction with that ozone molecule, and then further leads to depletion. So with this we come to the end of the video, wherein we learnt about refrigerant, the basic definition of refrigerant, why it is required in thermodynamic practice, and what are the different environmental effects of different refrigerants on global warming, or you can say the ozone depletion cases. Thank you.
If you want to study this topic in detail, refer to the book by S. John Publishing. Link is provided in the description box. If you found our video interesting, please like, share and subscribe. And do not forget to press the bell icon.
All rights reserved. This video has been prepared for educational purposes only. No part of it may be reproduced or copied without the permission of the copyright holder.